We're really excited to welcome everybody to our third installment of From the Ground Up speaker series. So this is the last installment in this year's speaker series. And this year we've been exploring environmental justice from a different angle, bringing in both content experts and neighborhood organizers to share their success stories and strategies. So far in this series, we've covered the definition and history of environmental justice, how environmental justice issues factor into upcoming city plans, and tonight we're going to be talking about what residents can do to advocate for strong environmental justice policies and how they can build coalitions to address environmental justice issues in their neighborhoods. Like I said, in August, we covered the context, history, and definition of environmental justice. Last month, we spoke with city planners and urban designers to get an idea of how environmental justice is factoring into city plans. And then tonight, we're hearing from neighborhood organizers about projects that they're working on in Omaha neighborhoods. And speaking of neighborhood organizing, the One Omaha mini grant applications are open through October 31st, so that's on Thursday. Awards are up to $1,000, and grants are going to be awarded in early December, and then awardees have up to 10 months to implement their project. So if you're interested in the mini grant, you can go to our social medias, check out oneomaha.org, or just come talk to me, and I'll tell you everything you need to know about it. That being said, before we begin, I just want to ask folks to silence your phones or other electronics, save all questions for the Q&A at the end of the discussion, and note that the emergency exits are directly behind you through the lobby or located to your left. So I'd like to introduce tonight's moderator, Kimara Snipes, One Omaha's executive director. Kimara has been organizing in East Omaha communities since she was a teenager and has continued that work through her involvement with East Omaha neighborhood associations, and in the past serving as the president of the South Omaha Neighborhood Alliance. So take it away, Kimara.
Thank you, Alex. Hello, everybody. Oh, come on. Hello, everybody. I'm excited to be here. We may be few, but I heard we're only 2 or 3 gathered. We can change the world. So we have an amazing panel here tonight. I'm very excited to be here with you all so you can learn from our panel of experts. Our panelists are Cheryl Weston, Mark Brennan, Leah, Keinama, and Shayna Sterling. So I'd like to tell you a little bit more about each of their backgrounds. Cheryl is a business entrepreneur, a public speaker, longtime North Omaha resident, and a staunch community advocate. She has volunteered and served on various boards. She served as the director of Lead Safe Omaha Coalition for many years and was instrumental in working with the Environmental Protection Agency to secure funding for the Omaha Lead Superfund cleanup site. Currently, Ms. Weston has been working with neighbors and public officials to advocate for the closure of the North Omaha coal power plant. She continues to stay involved in the community and civic affairs despite pushback from others. Ms. Weston consistently speaks truth to power. Leah has worked as a systems engineer in the software industry at food justice nonprofits and currently at Nebraska Journalism Trust. In the neighborhood realm, she has worked to enhance food systems with a particular emphasis on soil health, regenerative agriculture, and bolstering food accessibility while fostering resilient communities. Leah's fervor for cultivating networks and forging meaningful connections underscores her dedication. Currently, Leah is working on a project to engage neighbors to be active members in urban soil health and ongoing lead remediation projects. Shayna has sought out opportunities over the past 6 years to gain knowledge through community mentorship about building strong communities through growing food. She is an integral member of Free Farm Syndicate and Blazing Star Seed Co-op. Having worked with a multitude of volunteers in her professional experiences, she is passionate about mutual aid and how communities can work together to thrive. And last but definitely not least, Mark Brennan, along with his wife Michelle, owns Benson Bounty LLC, an urban farm in Omaha, Nebraska, just very close to where we're at right now. He's an advocate for strong neighborhoods and resilient cities. Mark is president of Benson Little League and a proud father of 3 fantastic kids. Recently, he has engaged with various stakeholders in addressing repeated flooding issues along Coal Creek, which affect transportation, recreation, health, safety, and private property along the creek. Please help me welcome Cheryl, Leah, Shayna, and Mark, and thank them for being here tonight. So before we get started, I just want to take a minute to thank Conservation Nebraska. We Make Omaha and Douglas County Emergency Management for setting up tables. I know We Make Omaha was not able to make it, but we are still thinking of them. And they really want to engage with everyone here, so hopefully you have had a chance to chat with them. I also want to thank the Benson Theater for hosting us here this evening. Round of applause. So, we have a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, the main goal for this evening is, one, to talk about some of the environmental justice issues that face our neighborhoods here in Omaha, and also get familiar with projects that are happening in Omaha, tactics that project organizers are using, and ways that people can get involved. So I hope y'all brought your notebooks, okay? At our first event in this series this year, we identified a few different definitions of environmental justice and environmental racism. The 2 definitions of environmental justice that we elevated are, 1, the federal definition, which is fair and meaningful involvement of all people in decision making. And then the environmental justice movement definition is the ability for all people to realize their highest potential without interruption from environmental racism. We identified environmental racism as the disproportionate impact of environmental hazards on people of color. And we learned that the goal of the environmental justice movement is not to redistribute environmental harms, but to completely abolish those harms. In addition to that, we also elevated some of the environmental harms that were identified that faced Omaha residents, such as residents affected by pollution from the power plant, residents affected by lead pollution from the Asarco plant and lead paint, poor water quality, neighborhoods that are more susceptible to extreme heat due to lack of tree cover, neighborhoods that are poorly designed for pedestrians and lack access to basic amenities like grocery stores, readiness for more extreme weather, the connection between neighborhoods that experience environmental harms and intentional decisions such as redlining and placement of the Highway 75 in North Omaha. So before we get into details about your specific or individual projects that you've been working on, can you give us a brief overview of the environmental justice issue that your project seeks to address? And we can start here with you, Cheryl.
Thank you. And thank you for that great introduction. And I didn't even pay her. All right. Well, again, I said thank you, and thank you to those who are in attendance tonight. And I'm going to add a little bit to the definition that Kimara gave. And the way I think about the project that I'm involved with at this particular time is the North Omaha Ad Hoc Committee. And it was the Ad Hoc Committee who was formed back probably April of 2023. And the reason that we formed it was because we were fighting against the Omaha Public Power District's closing of the coal plant in North Omaha, which did not happen. It had been promised, and we thought that we had won that fight like 10 years or so ago, but it proved to be not true. So we came together as a community, different people. It's all volunteer. that we wanted to approach OPPD and we wanted to find out why, when, and where, all those things, what it meant to the community. And when I look at what I consider to be environmental justice, it is considered to be a civil rights issue. Now, you probably say, I'm not getting that, but it is. You know why? Because we all depend upon physical, environmental, and its boundaries. Toxic facilities like coal fire plants, the incinerators, which emit mercury, arsenic, lead, and other contaminants into the water, the food, and lungs of our communities. And many of these same facilities also emit carbon dioxide, which is the number 1, number 2 drivers of climate change. But not all people are equally impacted. Race, calm down, don't get nervous, everybody tighten up because we said that word, but that is part of it. But it's also where you live. It's also your class, meaning, what kind of income? Are you low income? Are you poorly educated or educated at all? And then there's different interpretations of what that environmental justice is. The phrase of environmental racism was coined by civil rights leader Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr., who is now the CEO for the Sierra Club. He defined it as the intentional siting of polluting and waste facilities in communities that are primarily populated by African Americans, Latinos, Indigenous people, Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, migrant farm workers, and low-income workers. However, the EPA defines environmental justice as the just treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of their income, their race, color, national origin, tribal affiliation, or disability, in the agency's decision-making in other federal activities that affect human health and the environment, so that people are fully protected from adverse human health and environmental effects, including the risks and hazards, including those related to climate change, impacts of environmental and other burdens, and the legacy of racism or other structural or systemic barriers, that they would have equal access to healthy, sustainable, and resilient environment in which to live, play, work, learn, grow, worship, and engage in their cultural and substance practices. So all of that, and it comes back to the coal plant in North Omaha. Recently, there was an article in the Washington Post regarding that, and just 2 days ago, the New York Times, because the coal plant, which is becoming a topic because of data centers. And you might wonder, how does that affect us? Well, all of these data centers, Meta, Google, those are things that are drawing what? Electricity. They're power. So not only does this just affect North Omaha, it affects each and every one of you, because you know what? I think you use electricity. You flip that switch when you go to the wall and you expect to have lights. Well, with all of the data centers that are coming in, which there are 17 located in Nebraska, who's going to pay for their reduced power rates? Take a look at yourself in the mirror when you get home, or look at your neighbor, because you are. So that's one of the things that we're trying to work on with OPPD, because we want the power plant closed because of the effects on the hazards and so forth on human, but also because of it's causing who to bear the burden. So those are the things that I think, that I feel like what are part of what we want to do when I say the North Omaha Ad Hoc Committee. And I think we're going to do the next one. So we're going to let her go. So then we'll go back into some of the other part. But hopefully I covered it to what you wanted.
I think you gave us a very good answer to that question.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So right now at Nebraska Journalism Trust, we are working on an Omaha-wide lead or soil testing project that will test soil for lead. The reason why we're doing that is because Omaha is a Superfund site for lead, and that was designated in 1999, which was 2 years after the Asarco plant closed, and that had been operational for about a century. And that was pumping lead as well as many other metals and contaminants into the atmosphere and the ecosystem. So because of things like wind and rain and the fact that nothing exists in a vacuum, those contaminants have spread, and they have primarily settled kind of condensed in the East Omaha area. But one of the things that we want to check for is to see how far do those contaminants actually go, because someone had to draw a line on a map to say within this area, within this boundary, we will test for lead and we will remediate that soil. And what that means is that they'll basically dig up a certain amount, remove it, and replace it with other dirt. But how effective has that cleanup process been? Because we've been working on this for about 3 decades, give a little bit, and we are still seeing very high blood lead levels in children. We're really not testing adults unless they have an occupational hazard, but I would be willing to assume that we're also having very elevated blood lead levels in adults as well. And so we want to see how effective has that effort actually been. And so the way that we're going to do that is we want to test as many yards as we can throughout Omaha and get an understanding of where is that actually sitting. And this, will ultimately get data that will tell us a lot of things. Right now, what we're really thinking about at the moment is how effective has it been in the yards that have been remediated. So if you have worked with the EPA and the city and they have come in, they've taken dirt out of your yard and they've replaced it with dirt, where is your lead level currently sitting? And that can tell us things like how are the environmental factors like wind, like rain, impacting where you currently live. Maybe it'll tell you a little bit if there's lead paint in the area, the building or industry that's been occurring there. But we want to see how effective has it actually been in the spaces where we are looking at. And then also, I'm curious to see how far out the boundary actually is. Is it within the boundary that was set on the map, or are we seeing lead contamination that would extend further outside of the line that someone had to make a decision and somebody had to draw something and set that parameter and that boundary? So we do have lead testing kits outside of the theater, so if you want to grab one on your way out, you can do so. You can return it to any library east of 52nd Street, and then whether you have prior had your yard remediated or not, you can get a better understanding of what that is looking like for you and your family.
Can I just add
Thank
one
you.
thing to that? Is because the EPA has now changed the limits. It was 400 parts per million. Now it's down to 200 parts per million. So it's very important. That's great what you guys are doing.
All right, hello. The environmental justice issue that I'm mostly going to be talking about tonight has a lot to do with food insecurity and food access. Recent stats from Feeding America indicate that there's about 76,000 people in Douglas County that are experiencing food insecurity. And as we recognize from these talks, those numbers are not evenly distributed. So there are areas of Omaha which are disproportionately affected by that food insecurity, as we talked about with food deserts and how redlining has impacted where grocery stores have opened up and who has access to this fresh and healthy food. So the food insecurity and the food deserts that exist in Omaha are they're symptoms of a much broader issue and the way that the food system is broken in a lot of ways. There are a lot of environmental injustices that are committed in our food system that I'm sure you all are aware of, whether we're talking about monopolized seeds, worker exploitation, pollutants from chemicals on farms, or even just really inefficient transportation and us buying food from halfway across the country and shipping it here or even globally. So there are obviously a lot of these issues within the food system, but we are hoping that by making this food system a little bit smaller and working together in our communities that we can again, not redistribute those harms that we're seeing, but hopefully abolish them and make our communities more resilient in that way.
First off, thanks, Kimara, for having us, and everyone at Omaha and Benson Theater. It's a pleasure to be here with such distinguished panelists. I'm trying to get the city of Omaha to address the dangerous, costly, and ever more frequent flooding that occurs in Coal Creek. Coal Creek is a small spring-fed creek, begins around 60th and Sorensen, and then flows southward east of 72nd until it crosses 72nd at Bedford, and then meanders its way towards Crossroads, where it ultimately meets up with the Little Papio. And the Coal Creek has a long history of flooding, most infamously in 1999, when dozens of homes were damaged or destroyed, and unfortunately one person lost their life in that incident. It was in response to that incident that the city of Omaha pursued an interlocal agreement with the Papio NRD, and together the two agencies, the city and the Papio NRD, applied for a FEMA-funded study, a hazard mitigation study, to figure out steps that they could take to mitigate flooding in the future, mitigate property damage and the potential loss of life. That study came out in 2001 with a series of steps, very clear steps that the city could take to mitigate flooding in that watershed. They took some of those steps. Others they decided not to pursue. Throughout the last 20-some years, everything that was recommended at one point was in the CIP, in the city CIP, so the 5-6 year budget plan for the city, but ultimately it kept getting pushed back, and then what I found out from the city this year was that some of those projects were reprioritized. Well, that was really disheartening for me to hear that the safety of my neighborhood was reprioritized. You flash forward to May 21st of this year, and that's ultimately why I'm up here. That's ultimately why I got involved and pursued working on this project. There was a heavy rain event, 5-6 inches, I'm not sure how much fell, but that morning I woke up, and I live just a few hundred feet from the creek, and the creek was up on my property. But shockingly, I could see, and some of you might have seen this on the news, I live right next to Woodhouse Ford, and there were millions and millions of dollars worth of F-150s and cargo vans floating down the creek. It was a shocking scene. I quickly tried to go to Home Depot to get a shop vac because my basement was flooding, but quickly realized that was a mistake because every single road crossing in the neighborhood was beyond flooded. I first encountered a Moby bus on 69th and Pratt, which is just a block from my house and right next to Benson Little League, which I'm the president of Benson Little League. The driver of the Moby bus was stranded. Her phone wasn't working because it got wet. She was barely able to open the window, and we ultimately got some. The fire department came to help her, but I made my way over to 72nd Street. Another culvert that crosses Coal Creek crosses underneath of that, and that was beyond belief. Dozens and dozens of floating cars, people stranded, and it was we were scared for our life. Me and another lady, I wish I knew her name, went out to the median to help a gentleman. I had to take one of the bats from the Little League to break his window to get him out. And so to me, it was an issue, and we'll find out. I'll talk more about what I found out in my research about why the city deprioritized this, and how frustrating it has been in the process, and how I think we can do better as a city in pursuing more environmental justice.
Thank you for that, Mark. And hold on to the microphone, and we'll just come back down this way.
Great.
You've talked some about the history of the project and kind of how you got involved. Can you talk about a little bit more, and then tell us what are your goals for this project? What do you want to see happen?
Well, ideally, I would like the city to fund the projects that were identified in the hazard mitigation study. There were 7 culverts, so where the creek goes underneath streets, that were identified that needed replacement Otherwise, directly upstream, according to the study, would continue to suffer adverse circumstances. These culverts are undersized for the amount of flow that we know through engineering studies regularly occurs on this creek. And so 3 out of the 7 were ultimately replaced. It just so happens that they're in the more affluent neighborhoods where the creek flows through, and those lower income neighborhoods were ignored and deprioritized. And so ultimately, my goal is to get those back onto the city budget. Directly after the incident, I worked closely with Public Works because not only was the flooding an issue, Benson Little League, it's a 5-acre site, and the entire site was 4 to 5 feet underwater. But more importantly, and at that moment, especially worrisome to me, was that Coal Creek is part of the combined sewer overflow system. And so when we have rain events like that, the sewers overflow and raw sewage flows into those creeks. And so me and the volunteers that were tasked with cleaning up the flooded site simply wanted to know if it was safe and if anybody could help us. I want to give credit to the Douglas County Health Department. They were incredibly helpful in pointing us in the right direction to get that taken care of. Unfortunately, I cannot say the same thing for anyone in Public Works or in city government, which was really disheartening. But yeah, critically, we just need to fund what should be funded.
Thank you for sharing that. And Shayna, sort of the same question for you. Maybe you can give us some history on the project and how you got involved with it, and then what are your goals? What would you like to see happen?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Free Farm Syndicate and Blazing Star Seed Co-op. I think the last word in both of their names indicates how interconnected they are and how it wouldn't really make sense to talk about just one. So the goal with Free Farm Syndicate, the way that we operate is we are entirely volunteer-led and run, and there are 5 lots that we grow on throughout Omaha, primarily in South and Northeast Omaha. And with that produce that we grow, then we have free food distributions every weekend. So every Saturday from 10 to noon and every Sunday from 10 to noon, people can come get free produce from us. And with that, one of the things that you get when you grow a lot of food is a lot of seeds. So we are also working with Blazing Star Seed Co-op to participate in coordinated growing and grow out a variety of produce on our various lots. One of the benefits of having 5 different lots is that we're able to help reach the isolation distance of different vegetables that we're growing. So that means that we can plant 5 different types of peppers and not worry about them cross-pollinating, and then that means we could essentially contribute 5 new varieties to our seed bank. So that's one of the really great things about having the free farm lots spread out. And one of the things, I guess, to bring up with this and the issue of food access and food security is that there are a lot of different organizations doing really great things to prevent hunger. But one of the things that we really value is growing food sovereignty. There's quite a difference when we think about feeding people. Oftentimes we'll see in disadvantaged neighborhoods and communities, rather than having access to grocery stores that have proper refrigeration and things like that, there's plenty of food pantries, but the food may be coming from essentially what didn't get sold in higher quality markets or things like that. So it's not justice to look for feeding people from that way. The justice would come when we're actually able to create sovereign communities and people can have more control over the food that they're eating, the food that's being grown in the neighborhood. They know that there's not being chemicals sprayed on them, and it's also very open and people can get involved. So we've had people bring us seeds that came from the country that they immigrated from and said, this is a plant that I can't get in the grocery store. Is this something Free Farm wants to grow out? And in doing that, we're able to increase the diversity of food that we're able to offer to people, and it's a much more empowering way for everyone to get food, and it isn't so much of an organization serving a community as it is a community being able to serve itself and value what it is they want to grow and what they want to see in their communities. So I think that's the main goals of the project, is to increase access to healthy and fresh food that's locally and sustainably grown. And through that, then we are also able to create a more vibrant and diverse seed bank in Omaha that can distribute free seeds and also free seed saving education through Blazing Star Seed Co-op.
Thank you. And the same for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Okay, that's on. Sorry. So I used to work in food systems and working on food access. And so how I came to the LED project was actually in a different area, kind of contemplating and wrestling with the concepts that Shayna was talking about food security versus food sovereignty. And our educational programs that we offered, kind of talking more from the sovereignty standpoint of teaching the skills so people could do this stuff for themselves. And not only do you have access to a Walmart or a grocery store, but do you have the ability to grow that food yourself, have a buy-in to what happens, get the benefit from growing this food. But when you're kind of contemplating some of these things and you want to give this kind of solution to these problems, but then you start contemplating some of the environmental issues that disproportionately affect certain populations, it's not as simple as me telling somebody to go grow food in their backyard. Because with the current state of the, I guess the environmental state in Omaha, I could potentially be poisoning a family who is not also getting the education of what is going on in the area. And so I was getting really distraught and dismayed and going down the lead research rabbit hole, which is very grim and not great and will keep you up at night. But I was trying to think, okay, if I want people to be able to grow food and reestablish a commons and reestablish this community living where one person can grow one thing and another person can grow something else, what do we have to do? And what we have to do is figure out the environmental issues that are plaguing the soil and keeping us from being able to do that. And so I was looking at this LED project as a way where we could just collect information and figure out where we actually stand. So that way we could figure out what next steps would be based on that, whether that be soil remediation, whether that be soil amendments to build the soil instead. But that was kind of the process that took me here. And thankfully we've been able to work on this. And the goal, I would say, is definitely getting the data, informing people. So with people being able to do the lead testing, they are actually taking part in this process. They are a part of this process. And just the nature of that will take them towards the answer of, once I get my lab results and I understand where my soil is sitting, what do I do then? Because it could be much higher than expected. It could be lower than expected. As you mentioned, the EPA lowered its results. So I'll just share my house. It was actually really funny. I was going through the prior lead results, and I was like just amazed by how high some of them were. They were like 800s, 900s. And then my house was almost 1,500 parts per million, which is like horrific. And so now the remediation, my lab results are sitting at 210, but 200 is still above the new EPA limit, which means that my kids are playing outside in dirt that can be, that level should be lowered. And so just getting that information, figuring out what next steps are, working with the city, working with the EPA, working with the community to lower these lead levels. But then I think for me, one of the other key parts of this are finding out what other questions should we have actually asked about this. Because you can look at this issue and you can say, well, obviously soil remediation, but actually maybe what should happen is that we should have mandatory remediation. Because again, that concept of nothing happens in a vacuum. And so you look at landlords who maybe have a lot of apartment buildings and they are not remediating that because it's not required that they do that. And then the people there who live there who may have been barred the pathway to homeownership are also now not able to make decisions about the environmental impacts on their families. So there's all of these questions that I think as we get this data and we start uncovering the data, we will realize that, wow, we have answers to things we didn't even ask in the first place and nobody asked in the first place. And so that's one of my goals, is just figuring out how many pieces of this story do we actually not have because we didn't know that these were questions we should have been asking.
Thank you. And Cheryl, you've given us some of the history. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started, but most importantly, can you tell us what your goals are and what you want to see?
As I said, we got started back in April of 2023 because that was when the Omaha Public Power Board had talked about, and the staff were saying that they were not going to be able to meet the 2023 goal of closing down the North Omaha coal plant. And so a group, as I said, and to piggyback on what you said, it's volunteer right now. All of it is volunteer. And we want to change that. And when I say we want to change that, is to mean that we want to get some of those who have created this situation to help with the burden that it's put upon the people who live in the area. We want them to be able to pay for it. Because there's health issues. Nebraska has, and particular people from that area, is the highest asthma rate for deaths. There's children. Right now, like at the coal plant, there's like a daycare that is probably a block away. They can look right out the door and see the daycare. There is a park where the children go and play baseball and football and right behind the coal plant. So that was really particular why we got more involved. I did because having worked with like lead and knowing what those issues were that affected children, and most of those children all came from disadvantaged homes, areas, South and North Omaha. And this is how the coal plant. So you could say, well, racism doesn't affect, it does, because the coal plant is located in North Omaha where white flight began. And so now you do have more of a black and brown or Asian, probably it's a little low, Native Americans are there. So it is affecting those people who still live in those, and they can't get out because even though it's not supposed to be, there's still redlining. There's still barriers for those people to move from that area. And if, like you said, on your situation, the areas that people can afford it, they get to go and they take care of that. The city takes care of that. It makes it possible for them to get, these people cannot leave. Some of the goals that our group wants to do, and we have accomplished some all just by coming together and volunteering. And I have a list. If you would like to sign up with me afterwards, we'd be happy to have your assistance. But some of the goals that we wanted to, and we have met some, is that we want OPPD. We started out, we said the first thing we wanted you to hear us, and they have done that. We've had meetings with the CEO, we've had meetings with their community staff, and so they know that we are what we want and what we're about. We started out saying, hey, we want you to listen, and when are you going to do? We want to be kept in tune. Is this really going to take place in 2026? Because your word isn't too good. We wanted them to be involved in grants because they have a whole staff that can write grants. We want them because there is tons of money out there for helping energy efficient homes to be. There's programs for energy assistant. There's little things that can be done, but when you are living on low income, you don't have wages that are able to mainly take care of barely take care of you providing food, your rent, your medication stuff. You don't have. They think it's simple. Well, you just need to change filters. You can't even buy the filter to change. So we wanted them to work with us. We want them to develop a website, pay for the website. We have a developer. We also wanted, where this is going to be next year, 2025, we want them to be involved in helping to have a North and South Omaha 2025, which will be the first Earth Day ever, because the Earth Day always happens at Memorial Park. How many people from North and South Omaha really participate in that? How many people are learning what is the importance of Earth Day, the climate? We're wanting them to provide purple monitors, is because that way, if you live in certain census tracts that are very close to that coal plant, there are days that your children should not be outside. There are days you shouldn't be outside. And so if each one was able to acquire a purple monitor, they could have this to help them to be able to decide what's best, when it's good to go out and not. We're also wanting them transparency. We want them to be able to say, these things that are happening, like these data centers, and I get to keep throwing that out there because that is a big thing, folks. It's coming to you. Those data centers, it's cost. And they're finding out now more and more, as I said in the article that was in the New York Times and the Washington Post, that's creating a problem. The other thing that we're looking in, and we've started to work with other organizations, such as Conservation Nebraska, the Bold Alliance, the Nebraska Center for Rural Affairs, trying to make this a collaborative because they have more clout. But we say, as the citizens and customers of OPPD, we have the clout. But coming together, we get more clout. And that's the reason why we would love to have more people become involved in it. We're also engaging, we want OPPD, which to engage with environmental justice advocates and stakeholders in the community to understand the concerns of disadvantaged communities with respects to the design and the implementation of OPPD's projects. We want them to provide more education. We don't want to hear the way up there with all the big words and da-da-da. We don't want it. We want you to be able to communicate with the people in the neighborhood. You don't have to talk down to them, but explain. This is things, this is what this means. This is what's in your bill when you send this. As I was talking with one of them the other day, it's like, you send a bill and it talks about, oh, the new green plant, this and that. If you don't have money to pay your bill, do you think you want to look at that little shiny bulletin that's in there? That is the least. We want you to come into the community, meet the people. That's where you need to be. We want that. We want to have more diverse opportunities for employment within OPPD. And then we want to have them collaborate with the government partners, such as the city and the state, where they get funding, which is taxpayers' money, to help to make these grants possible. We want to be more involved in that. And we want all of this. We wanted to help to have entrepreneurs be involved in the solar, because that's a big thing. So we want people from the community that are most affected. We want to have more energy efficiency in homes. At one of the meetings that we had, well, the board members said, well, we have the lowest rates. Well, you might have the lowest rates, and you might have a $100 gas bill if you live west, or electricity bill if you live west of 72nd Street, but you come east, and if you get a $100 gas bill, you hurry up, or electricity bill, you're going to hurry up and get there and pay it because you know they might have made a mistake. We don't get those kind of bills east of 72nd Street. And that's due to not having energy efficient, and there's money to help the citizens be able to get that. And so they need to be able to come out to our community and do those things. That's what we're looking for in the goals. We're doing some things, and as I said, OPPD has been working with us in having more engagement, but we don't want to leave it, because you know what they say, talk is cheap. We want action.
Okay. Truth to power, we told you. So we're going to shift into part 2 of this, and this is where everybody gets their notebooks out. It's going to be really good information, and we're going to ask some questions that can help people who may be thinking about organizing on their own around just different topics and situations and issues happening in Omaha, Nebraska. So we talked about your goals, right? What are some of the tactics that you are using?
I think it is some of the things that we're doing, and I like the word more strategies, because that sounds like you're really thinking. Tactics is more like what they do in the service, the Army, and all those kind of people. So I like to say some of the strategies, I think, in any group is you got to recognize what is it that's your problem, recognize what are some solutions to that, and then you can build upon the strategy of how do I get there. And the big thing I always say, and I try to say to some of the members and everything, what is it you want? Know what you want. And you may have to do some educating yourself on what is available, what are the solutions. So I think those are what I would say is probably the strategies to use. Decide what it is. And there's a number of things. We all have so many things that we can become involved in. So we need to find out what is that most meaningful to you that you can become involved in, and then you do it. And are you going to have everybody on board? No. But it just takes 1 or 2 people to get something started. Hopefully I answered it.
No, that's perfect. Leah?
Yeah. So we kind of came to this topic organically, but I guess if we were to have chosen it for its effectiveness, one maybe not so great thing about lead contamination is that everybody is the target audience. It affects everyone, and so I think that in and of itself would create high engagement. As far as accomplishing the goal of actually collecting the soil samples and getting the data in, and this goes a little bit with getting others engaged and involved, it's picking partners who can help us with that outreach. So we are working with the library. They've been fantastic. We are able to give them kits, and they make those available to the patrons who go and visit the library. They can pick those up, and then they can drop them off there as well. Even if you were to pick up a kit today, you could take your soil sample, you could take it to any of the libraries east of 52nd, as I said, and that makes it pretty easy for you to be able to take the test and turn it in. So we try to make that access as simple as possible, the instructions as simple as possible, just make it easy for people to engage. We also, we're pretty clear. I have no way of making a recommendation regarding something that has a public health impact or a human health impact, but there's a lot of resources available as well. So I think making sure that people recognize that they are accessible, and that even though we're talking about a pretty doom and gloom topic, like there are solutions to it, and we can figure out what the next steps are. But I think as far as the tactic of becoming successful and reaching the goal, it's really about trying to get partners who can help us get more of the tests out there and get information out there as well.
And Shayna, what strategies or tactics have you been using?
Yes, I definitely agree with Leah. I think that collaboration and partnerships are one of the best things we can do when working towards these environmental justice goals. So we work with other organizations who also can help to grow and provide locally grown and healthy food to the free farm stands. So in addition to working with other organizations, we also work with our neighbors. So neighborhood engagement is really important, letting the people around our plots know that we're there, know what we're doing, and making sure they feel welcome to come to the free farm stands and get produce, as well as engaging neighbors who are already growing food and already gardening. We really encourage people who grow extra or have an abundance of extra produce to bring it down to the free farm stands and contribute it in that way. And in that, it kind of creates these partnerships where people can choose a crop they want to grow out, maybe for seed, and then if their garden is limited, let's say, to now just that variety of peppers, they can come down to the farm stand and supplement the food that they're growing and get tomatoes and potatoes and other things from us. So really just having neighborhood engagement is very important to what we're doing, and also regular meetings and making sure that us as volunteers are on the same page with what our goals are and what it is we're working towards, and actively inviting new people to come to those meetings and to come to events that we're hosting to hopefully expand our reach of who wants to be involved and is able to contribute to Free Farm or enjoy the produce or any of the things that we are putting out for the community.
Thank you. And Mark?
Thanks. Before I get talking about my project, I want to get back to Cheryl's real quick and just highlight what she's talking about with the data centers and why it's so important. Because Facebook data centers alone in the Omaha area, they use enough power. They use more power than the North Omaha coal plant generates, okay? So right, if those data centers weren't there, we wouldn't need all the power that the North Omaha coal plant generates. And so that could be shut down. We could have healthier neighborhoods, better health and impact, all across the board, a better community. And one thing I want to highlight about that is that was an intentional decision by OPPD and the Chamber of Commerce and city officials to actively recruit these data centers to come to our region because they wanted the jobs, the construction jobs, building, and really not that many jobs, good jobs, right now and moving forward. And so it was a short-sighted decision. They had two goals that they wanted to pursue as an agency, OPPD. One, and the chamber, bring more jobs to the region. Another, make our community healthier and shut down this plant. Well, they actively pursued one of those goals while ignoring the other goal. And that shows where their priorities were and why we need people like Cheryl in the community highlighting these issues.
And I just wanted to, you're right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Exactly, is that that was the whole thing is OPPD and Governor Ricketts said they were the hinge point. They were the ones that made that. And now we are the people. We are the ones going to pay for it. And the only time the really jobs come is during the construction of it.
Right.
Because those, if you drive out to where Google is right now, you won't see but a few cars in the parking lot because guess what? They're just big old buildings, and they may not be. They're filled with all of these, and I always think it's like, there was a movie out, and there was a TV show out that showed all these computers and things, and there's just a few people inside, so they didn't bring all the jobs.
And that's not even, Cheryl, to mention the environmental injustice that was
Right.
the prairie out near State Street, a 5-acre virgin prairie that Google just bulldozed over. And that was, that's on them, but it's also on city officials who, when reviewing the permits for the building permits, that issue should have been, and then they gave us $100,000 to replace the prairie, which was nice, but not going to get it done. Basically, what I had to do to try and accomplish my goals was go door to door and find out, because again, I worked well over a month trying to get Public Works and city representatives to address the issue, and was met with resistance. And I'm not going to say they lied to me, but they weren't honest. And that's just the truth. And so then I went around the city and I contacted the Papio NRD and got the full report and everything I needed to get the facts. And then that's when I did go and have a meeting with the city. And then once that didn't go as I would have liked, I just started going door to door and asking all the neighbors that I knew were affected by it, and then exposing the reality. And then, encourage those people to start writing into the council, to their council and to the mayor. The problem is there's a lot of apathy when it comes to my neighbors know the problem, but they've been dealing with it, and they've been dealing with the same responses year after year after year. But we did make I distributed all the information that I found to my neighbors, because there's no reason why the information should be out there for everyone to have. And we just tried to pressure them, but obviously it wasn't enough. But I'm not going to give up on it, and we're going to just continue to pursue and continue to push and raise the issue, and that's all we can do, really. And then funding, again, that's one of the most frustrating parts. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Wait for me,
sorry.
Mark. But keep going. Did you have anything else?
No, I don't think so.
He's ready. So I heard a lot of people power in that. In the tactics, I heard a lot of people coming together, collaboration. We are firm believers that no great work is done alone. So I appreciate the elevation of that. Now let's talk about the money, because everything costs money, right? So what are some of the ways that you have funded the work for this project? And we will start with you, Mark.
Well, for me, that was the most frustrating part, because we have this hazard mitigation study from FEMA. The city has at its disposal extra monies, federal monies, and matching dollars from the PAPU NRD. So any one of these projects that I'm asking to be completed, the city would only have to pay 50% of it, with 25% being picked up by PAPU NRD, and then FEMA kicking in the rest. And so it's just it's baffling why we've passed. Again, this is from the Public Works Department. These projects were deprioritized, and it was really frustrating for me to see, because just like Cheryl, I watch and I follow City Council on a weekly basis. A few months after I found out that the culverts in my neighborhood were deprioritized, or years back, I saw what came across the City Council. Well, at a golf course out in West Omaha, a culvert needed replaced. And yes, the golf course, to their credit, did cost share with the City of Omaha, paid 50% of the cost of. But this project was never even an issue. It's a brand new issue that the golf course brought to the city's attention, and the city said, sure, we'll cost share with you and pay the cost of the project. Well, we've got citizens asking the same thing, and they're not willing to do it. But I do want to give a huge shout out to the Sherwood Foundation because they are helping Benson Little League become more resilient to the floods. Because again, like I said, the entire facility was underwater. We lost extensive damage to the buildings and to the fields as well. But it's really disheartening when you're trying to rebuild something and you know that a lot of it's out of your control, and so it's going to keep coming unless we can get the city to change. But so on our end, as a private entity, the nonprofit Benson Little League, we got tremendous help to move forward, and next year begin making our facility more resilient. But again, that's just one facility, and there's homes and other businesses around that shouldn't have to depend on private dollars for public infrastructure.
No, thank you for sharing that. And we appreciate organizations that can come in and fill in a gap, like you said Sherwood has done in that situation. Shayna.
All right. Well, fortunately, when Free Farm got started, there wasn't a whole lot of expense to it. We were able to lease a couple lots of land, I believe, from the city for like $1. It was very cheap. The reason they do that is often, if you think about these empty lots, they would have to be taking care of these otherwise. So that could include like mowing or spraying chemicals. So hopefully we're able to prevent some of that by gardening on these lots. But as we've grown, there is more need for funding. So even though the land started off as something that we weren't needing to pay for, when we think about water cost, and we were able to borrow water from neighbors, but that's not something we want to rely on. So we were able to fundraise and be able to have water stipends that we give to neighbors who allow us to use that. So I guess as we've grown as organizations, the need for funding has also grown. So there have been grants that have supported what we're doing. I know SARE is one that kind of focuses on like sustainable agriculture. So there's a lot of different types of grants that could fall into what we're doing with Free Farm and Blazing Star. But one of the things to keep in mind with grants is then kind of how they're dictating what it is you're doing and how you're fulfilling the mission that you're setting out to do. So we also do have 2 annual fundraisers, one in the spring and one in the fall, where all of us as volunteers kind of come together to contribute different items that people can donate to have. So there's jams and salsas that people can donate and receive those. We also make merch, and we sold art that people contribute. So in a lot of ways, it's also volunteer funded in that people are contributing whatever it is that they are called to make, and then we're able to use some of those funds in a much more free way where we're not having to do as much reporting and things like that.
Awesome. Leah?
So this particular project is all grant funded, so not as lengthy of an answer. There's a lot of things that Flatwater and Nebraska Journalism Trust do, but this particular lead project is funded by a grant.
We poor folks. We just neighbors, grassroots folks. And so there has been no funding, but a change is about to come. So get ready, because it's coming. OPPD, it's coming. So we're going to, as I said, we have a strategy. We're giving people January, because, you know, we got to get through all this hassle and jungle with the politics, holidays, but a change is going to come. And so we're going to be going out to, as we said, OPPD. There are grants, and we want some of the money before it goes away. It's your responsibility to help. As you like to say, you do this and that. You have the volunteers that help with certain things, that neighborhood associations. That's fine and dandy, but you created this problem, you're going to help take it. We have tried to stay away from becoming a nonprofit organization due to, as you said, all of the reporting and requirements and kind of like taking over what you want to do. But we're going to be collaborating with another nonprofit an actual nonprofit organization that will help to be the fiduciary of it. And as I said, we're going out to OPPD, and then we're going to ask the people who are volunteering. We need volunteers for the website. We need volunteers to help knock on doors. We need volunteers, whatever skill you have. You may not think, but it is important, and if we come together, we can get this done.
Okay. And we can always go old school grassroots fundraising, right? Pass the hat. Just pass the hat. Okay. So let's talk about engagement. We talked about no great work being done alone. So how do you engage other people to get involved with the work you're doing?
We do through having meetings. We use it through social media. One tells one another. But we also, as I said, we have had several meetings with the CEO, Javier Fernandez of OPPD. We put that out, Metro Community College. We use that facility so that we were able to make it virtual as well as in person. Then we have a group we've been working with, as I said, Conservation Nebraska, and helping them to take and work together as to say, what is it you want, your needs, what are our needs, and so that we can take and put that together and send it to the board, who the staff works for them, because this is a public unity. So that's a way we have engagement. We're also wanting more people to go to these board meetings. You can do them online, or you can go in person. And having that at the board meeting, some of the new board members are willing to listen. And so we got to change them, because they direct the staff on what has to happen. So we're going to be pushing more and more for, we would love to have more people. And like I say, maybe you can't get away for that whole hour and a half or two, but you can take and be online and have it on for a few minutes and they won't know if you left anyway. So you can be online, you get to have an opportunity to speak if you want to, and if you don't. So that's another way, but we want to get more engagement grassroots, as you know, Kim, where you're all into the grassroots organizations. We're also starting to work more with neighborhood associations, getting them involved, because if they have 20 members that attend their meetings regularly, that's 20 more people. And then another organization. So we're all going to have more educational about what OPP is doing, the North Omaha Coal Plant, transparency, and all of that, but we're taking it to the neighborhoods. And I think that is how we help to have engagement. And then also, we get the media. Did she leave yet? Make sure you get that. Anyway, but that's one more way of trying to get it out, so that if, it comes up on there, that's more people who saw it.
Yes, so I spoke a little bit about our partnership with the library. So that has been a really wonderful way for us to get people involved in knowing that they can access the tests and then also give them an easy place to return the tests. We've worked with a couple other organizations who have some type of overlap in the topic of soil health some way, whether that is they have gardening programs or they do some type of food access. But we offer them the tests that they can either give to staff or to their participants. So that way there's another location where people can access and another location where people can bring them back, and even sometimes help in taking the test. For anybody who's interested, I will come take the soil test for you if you feel like for some reason you can't or don't want to. So we try to make that easy. Another way that we are engaging citizens and people who follow Flatwater, and to your point about going to board meetings, is we actually, and I am running a program called Documenters, where we train and pay people to attend local board meetings. So that leads to an increase in transparency and information access, because all of the issues that we've talked about, they are also talked about and decisions are made about them in these meetings. So we're really trying to build that public record of allowing people to see where these decisions are made, what conversations are happening, and then where they can plug themselves into these areas to get involved in what's actually happening in their local government. So that way, when it comes to these types of what turns into really big environmental issues, the community will have had an easier ability to access the information to hopefully evoke more meaningful change in a much easier way moving forward. So this Documenters program is something that we're building both for the things that we would like to do with it, which is really engaging citizens, but it's going to be a great way for everybody who is working on any type of issue that is going to be discussed in these meetings to be able to get that information, distribute it, and then be able to act on it as well.
Thank you.
One of the ways that Free Farm Syndicate and Blazing Star Seed Co-op are engaging others is obviously through volunteering. We host regular work nights where people can come and help on the plots that we farm. So we really try to prioritize making it fun. Obviously, if this is unpaid work, it's something that people are choosing to spend their time with us. So we really enjoy bringing like snacks or drinks to work night. Also, the organizers of seed processing days this year did a great job of making sure there was a lot of fun activities. So when we were saving pumpkin seeds, we were saving the shell of the pumpkin for kids to make jack-o'-lanterns. In seed processing and saving seed, a group of people laid down a tarp and did the cha-cha slide to save those seeds and crush the outside of the beans. So really just making the work that we're doing enjoyable goes a long way in getting people to come back and letting people know that next time you're at a work night, feel free to bring any of your friends or people who you think would enjoy this. So really making it something where people can enjoy hanging out together, but we're also getting work done. One of the things that Blazing Star Seed Co-op is doing is putting out a farmer's almanac every year. So that includes the seed catalog of the seeds that we have been saving. And it's really beautiful. There's a couple copies out front, but that is curated by a bunch of collaborators, so anybody who wanted to contribute art or poetry or any advice about growing, it is all in there. So there's a bunch of really great information in there, and that's hopefully another way that we're reaching out and getting people involved.
Wonderful, thank you, and yes, Mark.
Yeah, like I said, I went door to door with the materials, the information that I had found out, and distributed it to my neighbors and encouraged them to reach out to their representatives because, again, they're the only ones at this point that can change anything. Other than that, but we did a lot of work with the Douglas County Health Department, the Nebraska Department of Energy and Environment and Energy. A couple private firms that ended up helping us with the efforts to make sure that it was a clean site for the kids to continue to play there, play baseball there. But then ultimately, I pretty much gave up on the project, or I was so beat down by it that I didn't think anything was going to be done, and so I didn't do anything for a few months, and it was just recently that I was re-energized on the project. Which again, it's hard to say that, but that's the reality of the case. And so moving forward, I had considered maybe applying for the One Omaha mini grant, because one thing I want to do moving forward is engage the neighbors in the wider community about the issue of it being a combined sewer overflow, because I see kids in my neighborhood playing in that creek, right? And that's just it's not safe. So anytime, of course, I try and get that knowledge out there, but I've had City of Omaha employees directly after this incident tell me this is not a combined sewer overflow, there is no contamination. When I showed them the maps that proved they were wrong, they said that's okay because when it comes to contamination, dilution is the solution. And so there's so much water, there's nothing to worry about. Well, so not only are we not doing anything about the problem, but we're putting wrong information out there. You probably have seen those blue signs, right? If you've been driven by Coal Creek or any other combined sewer overflow body of water, we've got these tiny little 1 foot by 2 foot signs directly over only where the creeks cross the street. So again, if you come across the creek anywhere else, whether it be at a park or at a Little League, you have no idea that that's a danger. So moving forward, that's how I would like to engage people to get out the knowledge about that particular issue, which isn't going to solve the flooding, but.
Okay. All right, so before we open it up for questions, I want to ask a final question. Moving forward, what's something that makes you feel really positive about the future related to your projects, and how can people get in touch with you if they'd like to be involved? So something that makes you feel really positive about the future related to your project, and how can people get in touch with you?
I feel really positive that I was invited up here to talk about it, and like I said, it just recently, because I'm a full-time farmer, and so it was tough to put enough attention towards it, like during the growing season. And so finally, when I was able to slow down a little bit and get re-energized, at that same time, One Omaha reached out, and so that it really just kind of, fired me up in a good way. Moving forward, I'd love anybody's help in the audience. Like I said, sort of at a loss of where to go from here, but we need to go somewhere. And so any talents or time is appreciated. And you can reach out. My email is bensonbounty, B-O-U-N-T-Y, bensonbounty@gmail.com. Or also go to our website at Benson Bounty, and you can find my phone number there. Or go to Benson Little League if you don't want to go to my website. There's also the phone number for Benson Little League. That's my phone number. Love to hear from all of you.
All right, so I guess when I think about what I'm most excited for with Free Farm and Blazing Star, is just the amount of growth that we've seen, and seed processing has gotten a little bit bigger every year, and I feel like we've been able to grow a little bit more food and work with more people to bring food to the farm stands. So just seeing that consistent growth is really exciting to me. This is entirely volunteer run, so in my kind of like day job, I have the opportunity to work with a lot of volunteers, and I see even like corporations prioritizing giving people days off to go volunteer. So I know that there's a huge network of volunteers and people who are wanting and willing to get involved with this, and just looking forward being able to see those numbers and see people coming in and getting involved is really exciting, because if we're not able to give a whole lot of time to it, if there's a lot of people who can give a little bit of time to it, I think we'll really be able to accomplish a lot of our goals.
Thank you. Yes, Leah.
So I feel very positive and fortunate that we are actually at the stage where we are starting to collect samples. This is a project that I've wanted to do for a really long time. And, you know, my boss was willing to write a grant and make it happen, which I will always be super thankful for, because, I mean, it's so important. And when you get really passionate about something, it can be really stressful that people are just like, oh, like, this is fine, we'll just be poisoned forever. It's totally cool. But we've started the project. We are slowly starting to get data in. And I think just being able to, again, get the data, figure out what questions we should have been asking, what we need to write stories about, what information we need to convey, and the fact that people are very interested and that there's so many points of overlap with other organizations. So, you know, maybe some partnership in the future will look like an educational program on diet and how that can impact cleaning up lead in the body, or you know, different ways that we can partnership. There's just endless opportunities to connect with different organizations and different individuals across Omaha to work on slowly improving this. But I think also, there's a lot of power in information, and sometimes with environmental issues, we tend to kind of live in this really cloudy, hazy, like it's probably fine, I feel fine, because it's so hard to correlate the cause to, you know, point A to point B, when point B is years later, you're finding out that you have all of these health issues. So, I mean, just being able to give people an accurate understanding of what is going on in their homes and what they should be looking out for is fantastic, because it really is one of those things that if you can help one person, then that is incredibly impactful and worth all of the effort. How to contact. On the Flatwater Free Press website, you can find my email address if you want to talk to me. I, you know, didn't bring cards because why would I think to do that? But I can give you my contact information. But if you look on the Flatwater Free Press website, it's there as well.
Thank you.
I'm the type of person that when you tell me no, that makes me more positive that I'm going to do something. And you're going to do something. So I am feeling very positive about this. And when I saw my picture on the Washington Post, I'm like, oh yeah, I got your attention now. So that has shown me that things are going to move forth, and I feel good about this project, that we are going to stay on to this. And as I said in my words, and with all the data center, I'm not from Missouri, but in this case, I'm telling you, like Missourians, you got to show me. Because you said you were going to do it in 2026, and we're going to be on you until 2026. So you're going to do something. And so that's the reason why I said I feel very, very positive. And guess what? I brought this little sheet. So if anybody wants to sign up, and you can, you know, you don't have, it's just giving up a little bit of time. And I know we all have busy lives, and you don't have a lot of time, but just whatever, and whatever your specialty is. There might be something, you're good at talking with people, you're good at calling people, or you're good at writing or something like that. Every little thing helps. And one person can do this and one person can do that. And then also, Kimara, guess what? I'm leaving this with you so you have an example of how you can put that on your website for One Omaha, because you have all these organizations and contact. Woman knows everybody. So therefore, you're going to help. So, and if I get 2 or 3 people out here, and maybe I'll get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I'm moving forward. There's nothing that's going to stop us. And there's been a thing that's gone along in politics, as Shirley Chisholm said, if you see something, you got to do something about it and change it. Martin Luther King said, if you know it's wrong, what are you going to do to make it right? And one of my favorite people is John Lewis. He said, sometimes you just got to get into trouble, as long as it's good trouble. So I look at it like this. This is good trouble.
I'm a fan of good trouble. And I also believe I was just voluntold. I do believe that just happened. Okay, so let's give another round of applause, please. And we are going to open up the floor for questions. So Alex is going to come grab the microphone. And if you have a question and are able, please come to the front. If not, wave your hand and we will make sure that we get a microphone to you. But please, our panelists are open to your questions and eager to answer.
Hi, my name is Melissa. This is Apollo. I'm a homeschool mom, so I like to bring them to environments like this. I'm also a part of the environmental justice cohort with the Conserve Nebraska, so I'm happy to hear that you are working with them. They're great. My question, my frustration, I should say, is the Superfund map. I can say we're victims. Can you stop? We're victims of lead poisoning, and I lived maybe 3 blocks west of the Superfund map. And I went to an EPA meeting, and I was very emotional, and I was like, because, they're not from Omaha, and I was explaining to them how very racist their map lines are, and how in North Omaha, especially because we have coal plats, and even like if you're on Ames, we still have like a lot of industrial businesses in the community, and the fact that we're not represented in this Superfund map. When my children were tested positive, there were no resources for me except like this little ugly vacuum and like a bunch of papers. Like, I get so many brochures about it. And then also the marketing behind lead bothers me. It says it's 100% preventable. Again, so it's like victim blaming in my eyes, because it's like, well, it is preventable, but that's not on me to prevent that. So what are your ideas? Is it like an EPA task force that should be created? Like, how do we change the lines on the Superfund map?
So my hope with the data that we collect is that there's no more opportunity to kind of skirt around the issue and debate who's impacted and who's not impacted. And I know that that doesn't fully address your concern and answer your question, but unfortunately, when you're trying to change something or tell somebody to do something, you kind of have to pander and speak in the language that they understand, and the language that they understand on this topic is data. And while I am a huge proponent and advocate of lived experience, as you experienced yourself, that frustratingly enough, and especially in intentionally underserved communities, never seems to be enough to get attention. And while I wish that that was different, I feel like what I can do and what we can do at my organization is get the data to force people to listen and to evoke that change. And so my hope with getting the data is that then that will answer the next piece of your question of what should happen or what can happen, because there will be these indisputable numbers. And of course, there's probably going to come back with like, well, where did they test? And was it bare soil? And did they have a fenced yard? And did this, and this? And there's going to be all of these holes. But we will start with this presentation of data that no more can like a mother go to this meeting and have the fact that her children were tested and have a high lead level and have that be disputed over whether or not her particular area should get the attention to have that soil be remediated or whatever else has to happen, whether it has to do with paint or has to do with some other issue. So step one, I'm hoping that the data that we collect and the stories that get written because of that, and again, like understanding what questions should we ask, what information should we be putting out there, this will be one of the ways that we can contribute. So then whatever has to happen can and will happen from there, because it can't be disputed whether or not this is a problem in these areas that are being ignored. And that's always my frustration with looking at these maps is, if you look at a redlining map and a contamination map, there's coincidentally so much overlap. And so someone draws a line and decides, the people on this side of the line get this service and the people over there don't get this service, and over here it's contaminated and over there it's not contaminated, even though we all know how windy Nebraska is and it rains places and things happen and it spreads contaminants into other areas. And so again, this data is going to show us, even if this has been remediated, how effective is it now 10, 15, 20 years later? And these places that were ignored, have the lead levels grown? Has it gotten worse, or is it still sitting at a ridiculously high point? And so I know it doesn't fully answer your question. I know that I can't fully answer your question, but we can and we are and we will get the information that will force the hand of something actually coming from it.
I just want to piggyback on the data is great and they need it, but in the meantime, you want help. I would highly suggest that you contact Steve Zivny, Zivny, at the city of Omaha. He is the one who is over the lead cleanup, being involved in the original Superfund site and so forth. They just the city received last year, I think it was 2.5 million. My numbers may be a little bit off, but anyway, I know it was up in the millions from HUD, who they are to come in and help clean up homes if your child tested with lead. And some of that isn't necessarily have to be within that site zones, which is east of 40, well, it was east of 42nd, and I think they expanded it further. So I would contact, I don't have his direct number in my head, but it's 402-444-7000 is the city number, and you can just call the switchboard and ask for him. And then also, there's an old saying, way old than you. The squeaky wheel gets oiled. Make as much noise as you possibly can. Don't stop. And I know the young lady just had left from WOWT, but Mike at WOWT, he's one of my best friends because I call him all the time about problems. Call him. The more media attention you get, you may be on the Washington Post.
Any more questions from the audience? I know y'all have questions. Did you have something? Oh.
Thank you. Yeah, my name's Mary Minturn. I live in Bemis Park neighborhood. Grew up in Florence, so right under the smokestacks from the OPPD plant. And I'm wondering, have you run across any studies that show any other illnesses related to exposure to that polluted air besides asthma or respiratory problems?
Most of the studies they have been, however, oh, he didn't leave yet. Right back there, just get his number and name. That's Dr. Ryan. He's with Creighton. I do believe he has studies that show that there are other problems besides the respiratory, but a lot of the pollution and things like that that come from a coal plant or those types of things, they are usually more respiratory, but there's cancer, there's other things, child ADA, there's a bunch of things, but I don't know, Dr. Warren, can you add anything to that?
Sure. If you search for coal and climate justice in Omaha, you can find a story map that my class put together that has a few citations on the broader research on the health impacts of coal. We don't really have any local studies looking at specific impacts here in Omaha. We know what the general relationships are between coal, air and water pollution, and disparate impacts on communities, but nobody's really collecting data at the neighborhood and local level beyond some of the purple air monitors that have gone up, but that hasn't been really systematic yet. So I'm afraid I don't have more specific. So we have good relationships at the aggregate level. It's actually easier to find a large-scale relationship than it is for a smaller specific community.
Hi, my name is Nicole Rains. I am from Omaha, and I'm with Great Plains Action Society. This is mostly a coal-related question. Do you guys do anything related to the coal ash ponds generated by the coal plant? Is that an issue with the North Omaha coal plant? The coal ash ponds, the waste from the ash that they then put sometimes in lined ground, sometimes not, sometimes it seeps into the groundwater, which then gets into the river. Is that something your coalition addresses?
We have not. We had a meeting that Javier was at in August, and someone asked that question, and they're supposed to be getting back with information regarding that. But it wasn't one of what our group had. Was like one of those things hadn't come up until one of the people from a neighborhood association, I think it was Florence Neighborhood Association, said, what about the coal ash? And that's how we even heard anything about it, that it could be a problem. So they were supposed to get back to us, and thank you for reminding me. I'll have to follow up to make sure they did.
This is kind of a two-parter, but are you interested with possibly networking with other anti-coal plant groups from, say, across the river in Iowa? I'm part of a cleanup Mediam group, and I know that we're trying to work into Omaha. Is that something you guys would want to maybe
I don't turn down help.
build on our progress? Yeah.
I don't turn down help.
Okay, perfect. Well, then let's talk after this.
I have a sheet right here.
Right.
Bring it on down. I'll be first on it.
No, thank you. Great questions from the audience, too. It also shows expertise isn't always just on the stage, right? It's also amongst us. Any other questions from the audience? Yes. You can definitely ask more than one.
Thank you. Yeah, so we've had the lead remediation done throughout our neighborhood. This was some years ago. And I'm seeing a side effect. All of us are, if you're not planting anything where they've put new soil down because they put this plastic netting down to grow grass, I guess. So as we learn more about microplastics and these plastics degrade in the ground, are we looking at a new soil contaminant that someday, 50 years from now, we're going to be saying, these microplastics have now caused health problems? Is that something that has been a concern for your program, or?
I don't feel like I can speak to that specifically. I would assume with understanding how the microplastic would break down potentially. Also, I think it depends on how you're utilizing that soil. I mean, most people, they have lawns and they're happy with lawns. And if you're going to be doing something with the soil, obviously, just having a green grass grow in your front yard wouldn't be appealing. So I don't know if there might be, and maybe you would have some ideas potentially for pulling that up and doing some soil amendments to the soil, because obviously if they're going to be replacing your contaminated soil with other dirt, I would assume that it's not going to be the most biodiverse, happy to grow in soil. And I mean, I would probably be looking at doing some level of amending to that to be able to grow in it anyway. I haven't seen that barrier and what it looks like and how easy or not easy it would be to maybe remove that, especially if they're in the early stages of placing it or if it's optional. So I need to get some more information, but I can't really speak to the human health impact of what it would potentially do to people if they're either eating something that they grew in that dirt or just having the exposure to whatever that product is.
Any more questions? I thought I saw a hand. 2 hands.
Getting my steps in tonight.
I need to be down there with Alex.
Thanks. Yeah, I had a similar question, but for maybe how the free farm is dealing with the soil contaminant issues as you guys try to expand, and whether you had advice around the different types of crops and agricultural activities in which to worry more about. I know one thing, our yard has sort of middling levels between, but we have some chickens that scratch around, so we have raised beds for stuff that comes in contact with soil, but we kind of wonder like, how much are the chickens getting from the worms, and is that coming through in eggs? So if you have ideas about how to mitigate that.
Yeah, that's definitely something we have run into a number of times with growing on urban lots. As Mark talked about with the flooding that happened in Benson, we do have a lot in Benson. So we pretty much halted all work days and any sort of harvest or production on that lot until after we were able to get soil tests back to make sure there were no contaminants. But we're fortunate in that we had 4 other lots and a number of community partners who also help us grow. So if somebody is relying entirely on their yard for food production and something like that happens, that's again where we really need to be building these resilient communities so that they have other places to go, still get that fresh food. So I guess with that, we've just really had to be on top of it with soil testing. The year before this, there was that explosion with the Knoxcrete facility, and that was near another plot that we have. So again, we had to halt production and work days and wait for soil test results to come back. I unfortunately don't think any of it's perfect. I think contaminants are all around us, and I think they're really hard to avoid. But we do amendments to the soil where we're adding compost and we're fostering healthy ecosystems so that hopefully, whether it's like the mycelium in the ground or other types of like plants and roots that are growing that are helping to amend the soil, it's kind of just like a continual effort to have healthy soil, and then, like I said, just continual monitoring and getting it tested to avoid any of those contaminants.
I just attended, well, I attend them every month, the Omaha Land Bank, and where they have lots that they sell, and right now they won't sell to, if you're within that kind of like Superfund site or where there's been contaminated from other sources, or right, if you want to purchase that lot in order for a garden, you have to do a raised bed. You cannot, they say, because you don't know, even though they're cleaning up, it was cleaned up from the soil remediation before, and now some of them they have to go back. You cannot tell. So they only will sell lots to people to have a garden on if they're going to agree to have raised. So I don't know if that might help you, or if you're going to do any kind of food gardening or anything like farming or anything, it wouldn't be wise because we don't know what the data is on it.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. And just to answer the part about if the lead is passing through the chicken eggs and potentially into you, I do have no clue, but that sounds like a really cool study. Yeah, because I know that there are several people who do have chickens in their backyards, and a lot of them do grow in raised beds. And I know that chickens can process an immense amount of kind of gross things, but I would be interested to see if there is any contamination there being passed through to the person eating the egg.
I can actually speak to this a little bit. A lot of times with lead contaminant, it's you coming in contact with the soil. So you don't want to be growing things like carrots or leafy greens, things that could get dirt washed up on them. And it's actually the act of you gardening that's the most dangerous. It's not the act of you eating food. So like an apple tree in a lead contaminated yard isn't going to, that lead is not going to be what's called bioavailable in the apple. The lead doesn't transport up the tree into the fruit. Now, if you like hit the dirt, touch it, and then lick it, that's what's going to get the lead into you. So that same way, like it's really hard to get a root crop absolutely clean. So that's why you wouldn't want to grow root crops in lead contaminated soil. The same thing with leafy greens. When you're watering them, a little bit of soil a lot of times will jump up on that green. So if you're growing something like an apple tree or a well-trellised tomato, where the fruit that you're actually consuming isn't coming into contact with the soil, you'll be okay. So to your point about the chickens aren't making the lead bioavailable in their eggs. So chickens are okay scratching around in lead-contaminated soil. Another thing that I learned from Omaha Lead, the like city arm that does, keeps all the tracking of the EPA Superfund site and the remediation that's been done, and they also track what the lead contamination was before people opted into the remediation and after. But to Leah's points, they can only tell you what that site, what the lead results were, right after they remediated the soil. But what I learned from looking around on that is that the act of gardening and building up soil actually reduces lead content in the soil. So if you think about that, it might not be great to immediately start a garden in something that has 250 parts per million. But if you work that soil for a while in a very careful way using gloves, you can reduce the amount of lead that is present in your soil over time. So if that's something that is of concern through tracking and remediation, you can also do things to affect that. That being said, when they do replace soil, what they're giving you is very, very compacted, dead soil. So regardless of what the contaminants are in the soil that's been remediated, if you're going to garden in that soil, you're going to need to build it for a while. You can do that through compost, and you can also do it through adding other organic materials like straw, like wood chips, like leaves. So there's lots of ways to work around those things, and the most responsible thing to do is try different ways and continually be testing your soil, which is why the project that Leah is working on is so important, is because it's not just a one and done. It's constantly testing like, hey, what can we be doing on the ground, and what are the real results of what we're doing on the ground? I don't know, just off the top of my head.
Just off the top of her head. We just got to figure out how to have Alex on the panel and Planet next year. Any more questions before we wrap up?
Looks like we solved all the world's problems.
I'm telling you. Welcome to One Omaha, y'all. No, seriously though, before we do wrap up, I want to encourage everyone, first of all, to stay connected with us by signing up for One Omaha's newsletter. You'll stay informed about our future events, our resources, our opportunities to get involved. And speaking of opportunities, don't forget to apply for a One Omaha mini grant. The application closes on the 31st. We encourage resident-led projects. You can apply for up to $1,000. So we don't want you to forget about that as well. It's a great chance to just really fund community-driven projects. And again, those applications are open up until October 31st. So thank you again for joining us tonight. Thank you again to our super awesome panelists. And let's just keep working together to really impact our neighborhoods and help people thrive right where they live. Thank you again.